Poor woman buys crater for $100, but what she finds 25 meters down. Dorothy Mitchell never imagined that the worst moment of her life would become the start of something extraordinary. At 52, a widow with 3 children to support, she found herself facing a desperate situation with no apparent way out. That's when she saw the handwritten ad on a piece of cardboard on the door of Mrs. Margaret's little grocery store in the New Dawn neighborhood in Columbus. "Selling land 500 meters, $100 cash," read the message, somewhat faded by the rain. The phone number was almost illegible, but she managed to decipher the last digits. Dorothy's heart raced. $100 was exactly what was left from her late husband Harold's pension money, after paying the most urgent bills of the month. The idea of having her own piece of land where she could plant vegetables to feed the family seemed like an impossible dream. But here was the opportunity. With trembling hands, she dialed the number from a nearby payphone. The voice on the other end was that of an elderly man, seemingly tired of life. "Hello, do you still have that land for sale?" "Yes, ma'am, but I'll tell you right now it's not much to look at. There's a crater right in the middle left by some construction work that was never finished. That's why the price is low." Dorothy swallowed hard. A crater. That explained the absurd price, but her mind was already working. If there was a crater, she could use the soil from the edges to fill part of it and create raised beds. With hard work, she could turn it into something productive. "Can I see it this afternoon?" "Yes, you can. It's on Old Mill Road, kilometer 12. You'll see a barbed wire fence that's half fallen down. That's the place. My name is Vernon Parker." Dorothy hung up the phone with a mix of hope and apprehension. She walked back home, saving the $2 for the bus fare. In her small rented house at the back of a lot, she found her 3 children. Brandon, 17, was lying on the couch watching television. Ashley, 15, was doing her nails at the kitchen table, and the youngest, Tyler, 12, was playing with a broken toy car on the floor. "Mom's home," announced Ashley without looking up from her nails. "Kids, I have some news," said Dorothy, trying to contain the anxiety in her voice. Brandon turned down the TV volume with a look of annoyance. "Are you going to say we don't have money for something again?" "No, son. It's different. I found some land we can buy." The 3 looked at her with expressions of disbelief. Ashley was the first to speak. "Mum, are you delirious? With what money?" "It's only $100 and I have it." $100? Brandon sat up on the couch. "What kind of land costs $100? Must be a slum or something worse." "There's a crater in the middle," admitted Dorothy, "but I can plant around it. Imagine having our own vegetable garden. We'll never go hungry again." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler was the first to break the ice. "A crater? Like a meteor hole?" "I don't know, son. But I'm going to take a look today. If it's feasible, I'll close the deal tomorrow." Brandon shook his head, incredulous. "Mom, you're crazy. $100 is a lot of money to throw away like that. What if it's a scam?" "What if it's our only chance?" replied Dorothy, her voice firm despite the uncertainty she felt inside. In the afternoon, she took a bus to Old Mill Road. The trip lasted 40 minutes, winding through neighborhoods farther and farther from downtown Columbus. The landscape gradually changed, buildings giving way to simple houses, then to small farms and vacant lots. When she got off at the stop indicated by the driver, Dorothy found herself on a dirt road surrounded by low vegetation and a few sparse trees. The late afternoon heat made the asphalt shimmer in the distance. She walked about 500 meters until she spotted the barbed wire fence that Vernon had mentioned. Through the fence, she could see the land. It was larger than she had imagined, but the crater in the center was impressive. It looked like an almost perfectly circular hole, about 20 meters in diameter and with a depth she couldn't gauge from where she stood. "Mrs. Dorothy." She turned and saw a short man with white hair and sun-leathered skin. He looked to be over 70 but still moved with agility. "Mr. Vernon?" "That's me. Came to see the property?" "Yes, I did. Can I go in for a better look?" Of course. Just be careful near the edge of the crater. The ground might be a bit loose." Vernon opened a makeshift gate made of wood and wire. Dorothy entered the lot, feeling the dry earth give slightly under her feet. The place had a desolate look, but she could see the potential. The land around the crater seemed fertile, just dried out from lack of rain. They walked toward the hole. When they reached the edge, Dorothy held her breath. The crater was even deeper than it seemed from afar. It must have been about 25 meters deep, with almost vertical walls. At the bottom she could see some puddles from the last rain and a lot of accumulated dirt. How did this form? Ah, that's a long story, sighed Vernon. In the 70s, a guy bought this land to do some construction, started digging to make a basement or something. But then he stopped all of a sudden and never showed up again, left this hole here. And why do you want to sell? Look, ma'am, I'll be frank. I inherited it from an uncle I wasn't close to. I pay taxes every year and never used it for anything. I've tried to sell it several times, but nobody wants it because of the crater. That's why the price is low. Dorothy walked a full lap around the property. Despite the crater, there was a lot of usable space around it, and the soil, when she dug a little with her fingers, proved to be dark and moist a few centimeters below the surface. What do you plan to do here? Plant vegetables, greens, to feed my family. Vernon smiled for the first time. You know, it could work. The soil here is good. My uncle always said it was some of the best in the area. Just nobody ever had the patience to work with this crater in the middle. What about the paperwork? It's all in order. Clean deed, taxes paid up. If you want, I can take the papers to the notary's office tomorrow to transfer it. Dorothy looked at the crater once more. For a moment, a strange feeling washed over her, as if that hole held some secret. But she quickly dismissed the thought. She was letting her imagination run wild. I accept, she said, surprising herself with the quick decision. Are you sure? Yes, I am. It's $100, right? Yes, it is. Can we do it tomorrow morning? We can. They walked back to the gate where Vernon wrote down her address, and they arranged to meet at the notary's office at 9 in the morning. The whole trip back, Dorothy felt a mix of euphoria and terror. She was betting everything she had on a piece of land with a giant hole in the middle, but something inside her said she was doing the right thing. The next morning, she woke up before the alarm. She made a very weak black coffee, ate a piece of bread with margarine, and counted the crumpled bills she kept in a cookie tin. Exactly $100, not a penny left for the bus fare back. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Mom, are you sure about this? Asked Brandon, who had woken up early to try to talk her out of the idea. I am, son. But what if it's a scam? What if this Vernon guy is a con artist? We'll find out, she replied, picking up her purse. At the notary's office, Vernon was already waiting for her with a folder full of papers. The clerk, a bald, middle-aged man, reviewed all the documents with meticulous care. Everything is in order, he finally said. Let's proceed with the transfer. The process took 2 hours. Dorothy signed paper after paper, still not fully believing she was becoming a landowner. When she finally received the deed with her name on it, she felt her hands trembling. Congratulations, said Vernon. It's yours now. Good luck with the planting. Leaving the notary's office, Dorothy had to borrow money from a lady waiting for the bus to pay for her return fare. She promised to pay her back the following week. She arrived home exhausted but fulfilled. She showed the deed to her children, who still looked at her as if she had lost her mind. Now what are we going to do? Asked Ashley. Now we're going to work, said Dorothy. We'll go there tomorrow to start preparing the land. Work how, Mom? Inquired Brandon. We don't even have tools. It was true. Dorothy hadn't thought of that. They had no hoe, shovel, or even a hose to water the plants. But they also had no money to buy anything. I'll figure something out, she said, with more confidence in her voice than she truly felt. That afternoon, she went out to speak with the neighbors. Mrs. Barbara, who lived in the house across the street, lent an old hoe and a small shovel. Mr. George, next door, contributed a rake without a handle, and Mrs. Margaret, from the corner store, offered some leftover tomato and lettuce seeds from a previous order. Are you crazy, Dorothy? Said Mrs. Margaret. $100 plot of land isn't good for anything. We'll see, she replied, carefully storing the seeds. On Saturday morning, she woke her 3 children early. Tyler was the only one who showed any enthusiasm. Let's go see the crater, Mom. Yes, we are, son. Brandon and Ashley complained the entire bus ride. They said it was embarrassing, that their friends would laugh when they found out. Dorothy listened in silence, understanding their frustration, but determined to move forward. When they arrived at the plot, the children were impressed by the size of the crater. "Wow, Mom!" exclaimed Tyler. "It's huge!" "What an ugly hole," said Ashley, holding her nose. "It smells bad." "It's just the stagnant water at the bottom," explained Dorothy. "It will get better when it dries up." Brandon approached the edge and threw a stone down. The sound echoed for several seconds. "It's very deep, Mom. I don't think it's worth planting here." "The planting won't be in the crater, son. It will be around it." Dorothy began marking the spots where she would make the garden beds. With the borrowed hoe, she started digging the earth. It was harder than she expected, dried out by the strong sun of recent days. After an hour of working alone, while the children stayed in the shade of a nearby tree, she was sweaty and tired. Her hands, accustomed to cleaning work, began to form blisters from the hoe handle. "Let me help, Mum," said Tyler, seeing her effort. "You're still too young, son. But I can break up the clumps you dig." Tyler took the small shovel and began to help. His enthusiasm even rubbed off on Ashley, who ended up joining the work. Brandon continued to resist, sitting in the shade with a sullen face. By the end of the day, they had only managed to prepare one small garden bed. Dorothy's hands were raw, and she realized the work would be much harder than she had imagined. On Monday, she returned to the plot alone. The children went to school, and she took the opportunity to work without having to listen to complaints. The sun was strong, but she wore an old hat and kept digging. It was on the 3rd day of work that something unexpected happened. Dorothy was digging near the edge of the crater, trying to level the ground to plant the tomato seedlings, when her hoe hit something solid. At first, she thought it was a large rock, but when she dug around it to remove it, she realized it wouldn't budge. It was something fixed, buried deep. Curious, she kept digging. After an hour of work, she managed to expose part of what looked like concrete, a concrete structure buried right in the middle of her property. Dorothy's heart raced. She remembered Vernon's words about unfinished constructions in the 70s. Could it be possible that something was built down there, hidden by the earth? She continued excavating more carefully, cleaning the dirt around the concrete structure. Gradually, she revealed what appeared to be a wall or foundation. The structure extended toward the crater, as if it were part of something much larger, hidden down there. When the children came home from school that afternoon, Dorothy was dirty from head to toe, but with a different gleam in her eyes. "Kids, come see what I found." Tyler was the first to run to where she was. When he saw the partially exposed concrete structure, his eyes shone with curiosity. "What is that, Mom?" "I think it's some old construction. It might be part of a house or something." Brandon finally got interested and came closer. "It does look like a wall. Do you think there's more buried?" "Only digging will tell," replied Dorothy. That night she could barely sleep. Her mind buzzed with possibilities. What if there was an entire house buried there? What if it had historical value? What if it could mean a real change in their lives? The next morning she was back on the lot before sunrise. She began digging a trench along the concrete wall she had discovered. The work was hard, but with every shovel full, it revealed more of the structure. Around noon she made a discovery that changed everything. The concrete wall made a corner, revealing it was indeed a construction. And even more impressive, there was an opening, like an entrance or window, also buried. Dorothy carefully cleaned around the opening. It was large enough for a person to pass through, but it was completely blocked by accumulated dirt. She took the small shovel and began removing the dirt from inside. After 2 hours of work, she managed to make a hole small enough to stick her hand through. When she put her arm inside, she felt there was empty space on the other side. An enclosed environment, preserved down there for decades. Her heart pounded. There really was something built there, hidden beneath her property. But what could it be? And why was it buried? That afternoon, when the children arrived, she told them about the discovery of the opening. "Mum, "Do you think it's safe?" asked Ashley, worried. "I don't know, honey, but I need to find out what's down there." "What if it's dangerous?" said Brandon. "What if it collapses?" "The concrete seems well preserved," observed Dorothy. "It must be a solid construction." Tyler, always the most adventurous, was already coming up with theories. "What if it's buried treasure, Mom, or an ancient city?" "Easy, son. Let's be careful." For the rest of the week, Dorothy worked tirelessly to enlarge the opening in the structure. She used the small shovel to remove the dirt carefully, taking every possible precaution. It was slow, meticulous work. Each day, she managed to make the entrance a little bigger, and each day, her curiosity grew. What would be inside? Why was that construction buried? And most importantly, would it mean any change in their financial situation? On Saturday of the second week, she finally managed to make an opening large enough to pass through. With a flashlight borrowed from Mrs. Barbara, Dorothy prepared to enter the mysterious structure she had discovered on her property. Her children waited outside, anxious and nervous. Tyler wanted to go in with her, but she wouldn't allow it. It was better to first see what was inside before exposing the children to any risk. "Be careful, Mom," said Ashley, for the first time showing real concern instead of skepticism. "I will," promised Dorothy, turning on the flashlight. She took a deep breath and crouched down to pass through the opening. On the other side, she found something she could never have imagined. It was a built environment, with solid concrete walls and a vaulted ceiling. The floor was of finished cement, slightly damp, but in good condition, and the space was much larger than she expected. Her flashlight couldn't illuminate all the corners. Dorothy took a few cautious steps inside. The air was heavy, but breathable. There were no signs of collapse or structural instability. Whoever built that did a solid job. Walking slowly, she began to explore the space. There were divisions as if they were different rooms. On one of the walls, she found what looked like old pipes, probably for water and sewage. But the most impressive discovery came when she reached one of the corners of the space. There was equipment there, old machines covered by plastic tarps that had miraculously protected them from the moisture all these years. Dorothy carefully lifted one of the tarps. Underneath was a machine she couldn't immediately identify. It looked like some kind of industrial equipment, all made of cast iron with bronze details. She continued exploring and found more machines, all covered and preserved. There were also stacked wooden crates, some tools hanging on the wall, and even what looked like a small office with a desk and chair. It was clear that place had been used for some kind of production or business. But what? And why had it been abandoned and buried? After 40 minutes of exploring, Dorothy came out of the underground space. Her children approached immediately, eager for news. "So, Mom, what's in there?" "There's a built place, really big, with old machines and equipment." "Machines?" asked Brandon, interested. "What kind of machines?" "I can't say. They're very old, but they're preserved, covered in plastic." Tyler couldn't contain himself. "Can I see, Mom? Please. Tomorrow, son. It's already getting dark." That night, Dorothy barely slept a wink. Her mind worked trying to understand what she had discovered. Clearly, someone had invested a lot of money in that place. The machines looked expensive, and the construction was solid and well made. But why had everything been abandoned? And more importantly, could it have any value? Could it be the change of fortune her family so desperately needed? On Sunday morning, she returned to the lot with her 3 children. This time she allowed Tyler to enter the underground space with her, while Brandon and Ashley waited at the entrance. The boy was impressed with the space. "Wow, Mom, it's like a secret house." "Yes, it is, son." "And these machines? What are they for?" "I don't know yet. We'll find out." Dorothy began to examine the machines more carefully. On one of them, she found a metal plate with inscriptions. It was a bit rusty, but it was still possible to read. "Handmade brick manufacturing. Model 1972. Bricks. So that was it. That place had been a brick factory. That explained the machines and equipment. And it also explained why it had been built partly underground, probably to maintain a stable temperature during the production process. "Tyler, I think I've discovered what all this is for." "What, Mom?" "It was a brick factory." The boy looked around with new understanding. So, someone used to make bricks down here? Exactly. But many questions remained. Why had the factory been abandoned? Why had it been buried instead of simply closed? And most importantly, would the machines still work? When they left the underground space, Dorothy told her discoveries to Brandon and Ashley. "A brick factory," said Ashley. "Is that worth anything?" "I don't know, dear, but I'm going to find out." "Mom," said Brandon thoughtfully, "if those machines still work, maybe we can make money with them." That was exactly what Dorothy was thinking. But first, she needed to better understand what she had discovered. On Monday, she left the children at school and went to the public library. She asked the librarian for help researching handmade brick factories from the 70s in Columbus. To her surprise, she found several references. Apparently, it had been a prosperous business in the region at that time. Handmade bricks were highly valued for building high-standard homes. The librarian, Mrs. Constance, a lady with graying hair and reading glasses, became interested in the research. "Why do you want to know about this?" Dorothy hesitated for a moment, then decided to tell the truth. "I found an old brick factory buried on a piece of land I bought." "Buried? How so?" "It's a long story, but the machines are still there, preserved." Mrs. Constance adjusted her glasses, interested. "You know, my late husband worked in construction back then. He always said the handmade bricks from Columbus were the best in the region. They had a special quality because of the clay here." "And is there still a market for that?" "Oh, yes. Nowadays, with this trend for rustic and sustainable construction, handmade brick is worth its weight in gold. The problem is that almost no one knows how to make it anymore." Dorothy felt her heart race. Was it possible she had discovered not just an abandoned factory, but a business with potential? "Do you know where I can find someone who understands these old machines?" "There's Mr. Howard, who lives over in the Victory neighborhood. He's retired, but worked his whole life with industrial machines. If anyone can help, it's him." Dorothy wrote down the address and thanked her. Mrs. Constance added, "If you really manage to get a handmade brick factory running, you can be sure you'll have customers. My nephew is an engineer, and is always complaining he can't find quality brick for his projects." Leaving the library, Dorothy felt hopeful for the first time in a long while. Perhaps her impulsive $100 purchase wasn't the madness everyone thought. Perhaps it was the beginning of something big. In the afternoon, she took a bus to the Victory neighborhood. Mr. Howard's house was simple, but well kept. A man of about 65 answered the door. He had graying hair, a white mustache, and calloused hands that betrayed a life of manual labor. "Mr. Howard? That's me. How can I help you?" "My name is Dorothy. Mrs. Constance from the library told me you understand old machines." "I do indeed. I worked 40 years with them." "What's the problem?" Dorothy explained her situation, from buying the land to discovering the underground factory. Mr. Howard listened with growing attention. "A brick factory from the 70s, preserved." "That's right. The machines are covered with a top. They seem to be in good condition." "Can I take a look?" "Of course. When can you go there?" "How about tomorrow morning?" "Perfect." The next morning, Dorothy waited for Mr. Howard at the entrance to the property. He arrived by bicycle, carrying a toolbox. "So this is where you discovered the factory?" "Yes, it is. Come, I'll show you." They went down through the opening Dorothy had made into the underground structure. Mr. Howard turned on his own flashlight and began to examine the space. "Good heavens," he exclaimed. "This here is a work of art. How so?" "This kind of underground construction for a brick factory is a rare thing. It maintains a constant temperature, protects the equipment. Whoever planned this knew what they were doing." He approached the machines and began to examine them with professional care. "These machines are top quality, German-made if I'm not mistaken. Do they still work?" "Let me see." Mr. Howard removed the tarps completely and spent the next hour examining each piece of equipment. He tested gears, checked pipes, inspected motors. "Dorothy, you have no idea of the treasure you've discovered here." "Is it really valuable?" "It's not just valuable. These machines, if I can get them running, can produce the best handmade bricks you've ever seen, and the market for that today is starving." "But what do you need to do to get them working?" "Well, you'll need electricity. Some parts need to be cleaned and lubricated, and we have to test the motors. But the basic structure is perfect. And how much would all that cost? Mr. Howard thought for a few moments. Look, if you were to hire someone, it would be expensive. But I'm retired, I don't have much to do. If you'd like, I can help in exchange for a partnership in the business. Dorothy couldn't believe what she was hearing. Partnership? Yes, you contribute the land and the equipment. I contribute the technical knowledge and the work. We split the profits. But I don't understand anything about business. You don't need to. I'll handle the technical side, you handle the administrative side, and I can teach everything to your children if they want to learn. Dorothy felt an emotion she hadn't experienced in years. Real hope, based on something concrete. Are you sure this can work? I am. The market is there, the machines are excellent, and the quality of the clay in this region is well known. What could go wrong? That afternoon, Dorothy returned home with her head spinning. She told her children everything, who this time listened with real attention. "Mom, you mean we're going to have a company?" asked Tyler, excited. "It could be, son." "And can I learn to work the machines?" Brandon wanted to know. "Mr. Howard said he can teach you." For the first time since she had bought the land, Ashley smiled. "Mom, I think you might have actually hit the jackpot." "It's still too early to be sure," pondered Dorothy, trying to keep her feet on the ground. "But it's a real possibility." For the rest of the week, Mr. Howard worked in the underground factory, cleaning and preparing the machines. Dorothy helped where she could, learning about the handmade brick manufacturing process. It was more complex than she had imagined. The clay had to have the right composition, the mixture with sand and other materials followed specific proportions, and the drying and firing process required precise technical knowledge. "Don't worry," said Mr. Howard. "You learn by doing. In 6 months you'll understand everything." By the end of the week they managed to get one of the smaller machines running. It was responsible for mixing the clay and molding the bricks. When they saw the first brick coming out of the machine, Dorothy felt tears in her eyes. "It worked, and how it worked," celebrated Mr. Howard. "Look at the quality of this brick. Perfect." Brandon, who had skipped school to help, held the brick with admiration. "We made this, Mum." "Yes, we did, son." It was just the first test brick, but it represented much more. It represented the possibility of a different life, of financial independence, of dignity. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. But of course, things wouldn't be that simple. The following Monday, when Dorothy arrived at the property, she found a man in a suit standing near the crater. "Are you the owner of this land?" "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" The man introduced himself as Roger Silverman, a real estate agent. He was tall, wore expensive sunglasses, and had an air of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. "Ma'am, I have a proposal to make. I represent some investors interested in buying properties in this area. It's not for sale. You haven't even heard my offer yet." "I don't need to. I just bought it. I'm not selling." Roger smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Ma'am, let me be clear. This property is worthless. It has a giant crater in the middle. No one can build anything here." "You're mistaken. I am building something." "What?" "A vegetable garden." Dorothy didn't want to reveal the discovery of the factory, so she just said, "My plans are my own." "Look, I'll be generous. I'll offer $5,000. That's 50 times what you paid." "I refuse." "7,000. "No." "10,000, final offer." "Sir, I already said it's not for sale." Roger took off his sunglasses and stared at her sternly. "Ma'am, I think you should reconsider. Sometimes what seems like a good deal can turn into a headache." There was something threatening in his tone, but Dorothy wasn't intimidated. "Are you threatening me?" "Of course not. Just offering some friendly advice." He put his sunglasses back on and headed for an imported car parked on the road. "I'll leave my card, in case you change your mind." After he left, Dorothy was thoughtful. Why would anyone offer $10,000 for a property that's worthless? Was there something she didn't know? When Mr. Howard arrived, she told him about Roger's visit. "Interesting," said the man pensively. "Someone knows something they're not telling." "What do you think it could be?" "It could be that they know about the factory. Or it could be something even we don't know yet." "What do you mean?" "Dorothy, let me tell you something. This land might hide more secrets. Factories aren't buried by accident. Someone had a very strong reason to do this. What kind of reason? I don't know, but I think we should investigate further before making any decisions. That afternoon, they decided to explore the underground factory more thoroughly. Until then, they had focused on the machines and equipment. But the space was large, and there were still areas they hadn't examined carefully. In one of the farthest corners, they found a metal door, half hidden behind some boxes. The door was locked, but Mr. Howard managed to force it open with one of the tools. On the other side was a small but complete office: desk, chair, metal filing cabinet, and even an old telephone. On the desk, protected by a plastic cover, were papers and documents. Dorothy examined the documents carefully. They were production records, customer orders, invoices, all dated between 1972 and 1975. The factory had operated for 3 years before being abandoned. "Look here," said Mr. Howard, examining one of the invoices. "Special bricks for the construction of the Columbus City Hall headquarters. This factory supplied materials for important projects." "And here," added Dorothy, reading another document, "special order of 3,000 bricks for the State Bank." This was a serious business. They continued examining the papers. They found records of employee salaries, purchases of raw materials, supply contracts. Everything indicated a prosperous and well-organized business. But then they found something intriguing: a letter handwritten addressed to someone named Albert Henderson. "Albert, I can't go on any longer. The pressure has increased and we have no choice. I will bury everything as we agreed and disappear for a while. When things calm down, we'll come back. Protect what is ours. Signed, Paul." "Paul who?" asked Dorothy. Mr. Howard searched through the documents until he found a municipal license in the name of Paul Henry Mitchell. He was the owner of the factory. But what were these pressures? "I don't know, but it's clear he didn't abandon the business of his own free will." They continued searching and found more clues: collection letters from a bank, legal notifications, and even an anonymous threat that read, "Paul, if you don't stop asking questions, you and your family may regret it." "My God," whispered Dorothy. "What is this story?" "It seems Paul got himself into some trouble and had to hide the factory and flee." At the bottom of the file, they found the most intriguing document of all. It was a deed registered at the notary's office, transferring the property of the land to Vernon Parker in 1976. The same Vernon who had sold the land to Dorothy. "Vernon knew!" she exclaimed. "He knew about the factory and didn't tell me." "Calm down, Dorothy. It may be that he didn't know everything. But he must know something. I'll talk to him. Better we go together. If there's some confusion in this story, it's good to have a witness." In the late afternoon, they went to Vernon's house. He lived in a simple house in downtown Columbus, in an old neighborhood with narrow streets. Vernon received them with surprise. "Mrs. Dorothy, how is the land? Managed to plant anything?" "I did, Mr. Vernon, but I discovered some things I'd like to talk to you about." Of course. Come in." The living room was small but cozy, decorated with antique furniture and family photographs. Vernon offered coffee and they sat down. "Mr. Vernon," began Dorothy, "do you remember saying that a man started building on the land in the 70s and then disappeared?" "Yes, I remember." "Do you know how you ended up owning the land?" Vernon was silent for a few moments, clearly uncomfortable. "Why do you want to know this?" "Because I discovered the underground construction, and I found documents." Vernon's face paled. "What documents?" "From the business that operated there. A brick factory." Vernon sighed deeply and stood up, walking to the window. "I knew someday someone would find out." "You knew about the factory?" "Yes, I did. Paul Henry was my cousin." "Cousin?" "Yes. We grew up together, here in Columbus. When he set up the factory, I helped as much as I could." "And what happened? Why did he disappear?" Vernon sat back down, looking weary. "It's a complicated story. Paul had discovered a special technique for making bricks, a mixture that made the bricks more resistant than normal. And what was the problem? The problem was that he discovered this technique by accident, messing with some materials that he shouldn't have been messing with." "What materials?" There was a chemical industry nearby that was improperly disposing of some waste. Paul discovered that by mixing this waste with the clay, the bricks became stronger, much stronger. Mr. Howard and Dorothy exchanged glances, worried. Waste? What kind of waste? It wasn't anything toxic or dangerous. It was more like a kind of chemical additive, but the company didn't want anyone to know they were disposing of it improperly. And then? Then they started pressuring Paul. First they tried to buy his silence, then they moved on to threats. And he fled. He buried the factory and vanished. He transferred the property to me before leaving, to protect it somehow. He said when things calmed down he'd come back to reopen the business. And did he come back? Vernon shook his head sadly. I never heard from him again. That was 50 years ago. But this chemical waste, is it still there? No. Paul used up everything he had before burying the factory. And even if something had remained, 50 years would be enough time for any chemical to decompose completely. Dorothy felt torn between relief and apprehension. On one hand, there was no chemical danger. On the other, understanding that someone had tried to intimidate Paul to stop his production. Mr. Vernon, do you think there could still be any danger? No, I don't think so. The people from that time have either died or are very old. The companies have changed hands. No one cares about a story from 50 years ago anymore. Then why did that broker show up wanting to buy my land? Broker? What broker? Dorothy described the visit from Roger Silverman. Vernon became thoughtful. That name doesn't ring a bell. It could be a coincidence. Land in that region is appreciating because of the city's expansion. Do you think I can continue with the factory project without problems? I think so. But if I were you, I wouldn't make much noise about Paul's story. I'd let that lie and move the business forward. They returned home with more questions than answers, but also with relief. At least they knew there was no immediate danger at the factory. In the following weeks, they continued working on restoring the equipment. Mr. Howard managed to get all the machines running, and they began producing the first bricks on a commercial scale. The quality was excellent, as he had promised. The bricks had exceptional strength and an impeccable finish, but producing enough quantity to sell required a lot of work. It was then that Mr. Howard suggested hiring helpers. Dorothy, the two of us alone won't be able to handle even a small order. We need more people. But I don't have money to pay salaries. We can start with a partnership, call 2 or 3 people to work in exchange for a percentage of the profits. And where will we find these people? I know a few men who are unemployed, serious people, who need an opportunity. That's how they managed to form a small work team. Charles, a 40-year-old man who had lost his job at a construction site, Vernon, a retiree who wanted extra income, and Barbara, Mrs. Margaret's sister, who understood administration. With more people working, production increased significantly. In 3 weeks, they managed to produce 2,000 bricks of excellent quality. The first customer appeared through Mrs. Constance from the library, whose engineer nephew actually needed handmade bricks for a project. "How much do you charge?" he asked, examining the samples. Dorothy looked at Mr. Howard, who whispered, $2 per brick. $2 each, she said. Excellent, I need 5,000 bricks. Can you deliver them in a month? Yes, we can. It was the first order, $10,000. Dorothy could hardly believe it. In 1 month of work, they would earn 100 times what she had paid for the land. But the joy was short-lived. The following week, Roger Silverman appeared again. This time he wasn't alone. He brought an older man with a serious appearance. "Mrs. Dorothy, this is Dr. Morris, an attorney. We've come to make a final offer." "I've already said I'm not interested in selling." "The issue is that some legal problems have arisen with your property," said the attorney. "What problems?" "The land has irregular documentation. The previous owner left some pending issues that could complicate your situation." "That's not true," retorted Dorothy. "We checked everything at the notary's office." "You checked the basic documentation, but there are unresolved environmental issues, an old investigation about soil contamination." Dorothy felt her heart race. Could it have something to do with the chemical waste Vernon had mentioned? What kind of contamination? Irregular dumping of chemical products in the 70s. The case was never resolved, and the responsibility could fall on the current owner. How much would it cost to resolve this? It could reach $50,000 in fines and land cleanup. Dorothy paled. She didn't even have $5,000, let alone $50,000. But we have a solution, the lawyer continued. My client is willing to buy the land and assume all environmental liabilities for $20,000. $20,000? It's a generous offer, considering the problems. I need to think. You have 24 hours. After that, we'll have to initiate legal proceedings. After they left, Dorothy sat on the edge of the crater, desperate. She had managed to turn a useless plot of land into a thriving business, but now she risked losing everything because of problems she didn't even know existed. Mr. Howard tried to comfort her. Dorothy, something isn't right about this story. What do you mean? If there were really serious environmental problems, the proper authorities would have shown up here already. They wouldn't send private lawyers. What do you think is happening? I think someone found out about our factory and wants to take over the business. But how? I don't know, but I'll find out. That night, Mr. Howard went to Vernon's house. He told him about the legal threats and the lawyer's demands. Vernon, are you sure there's nothing irregular with the land? I'm sure. I've paid the property tax on time for 50 years. There's never been any environmental notification. Then what do these men want? Let me make some calls. I know people who might have information about these characters. The next day, Vernon showed up at the factory with important news. I found out who this Dr. Maurice is. Who? He's a lawyer for a big construction company from New York, and Roger works for them too. Construction company? Yes, and do you know why they want your land? Why? Because City Hall announced they're going to build a shopping center nearby. When that happens, land in this area will be worth a fortune. How much? At least $100,000 for each lot like yours. Dorothy felt a mix of anger and determination. They were trying to trick her with false threats to steal her property for a fraction of its real value. What can we do? First, we go to the Environmental Agency to check if there really is any case. I'm sure there isn't. And if they insist with the threats, then we find a real lawyer. They spent the next morning at the Municipal Environmental Agency. As Mr. Howard had predicted, there was no case or investigation related to Dorothy's land. Are you sure? She asked the clerk. Absolutely. There is no record of any environmental problems at this address. They returned to the factory with that confirmation. Dorothy felt more confident, but still worried about possible retaliation. When Roger and the fake lawyer showed up in the late afternoon, she was prepared. So, what's the decision? The decision is that I found out you're lying. There is no environmental case. Excuse me? I went to the proper agency to check. There is nothing irregular with my property. Roger's face twisted into an angry expression. Ma'am, you're making a mistake. The mistake was you trying to trick me. Let's see how long you last when we start creating real problems. Is that a threat? It's a promise. They left, but Dorothy knew it wasn't the end. People determined to get something by underhanded means don't give up easily. Her concern was confirmed the following week. Arriving at work in the morning, she found the factory partially flooded. Someone had intentionally clogged the drainage system during the previous night's rain. My God! Exclaimed Mr. Howard. The machines! They rushed to examine the equipment. Luckily, the water hadn't reached the electric motors, but several bricks that were drying were lost. It was sabotage, said Charles, examining the drainage system. Someone clogged it on purpose with stones and mud. It was those men, said Dorothy, furious. Now it's a matter for the police, suggested Barbara. No, said Mr. Howard. We have no way to prove who it was, and if we go to the police, they might invent other ways to harm us. So what do we do? We'll have to protect ourselves. Starting today, someone stands guard here every night. They organized a surveillance scheme. The men took turns sleeping at the factory overnight. It was uncomfortable, but necessary. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. They managed to deliver the first order on time, and the client was so satisfied that he ordered 5,000 more bricks. But the peace didn't last long. One morning, Dorothy received an unexpected visit at home. It was an elegant woman, about 40 years old, who introduced herself as Diana Richardson. I'm a lawyer and represent the true owners of your land. True owners? Yes. My client is Albert Henderson, the legitimate heir to the property you purchased irregularly. Dorothy remembered the name Albert, mentioned in the letter she had found at the factory. How is it irregular? Vernon Parker had no right to sell the land. The transfer made by Paul Henry in 1976 was fraudulent. How can it be fraudulent if it's registered at the notary's office? Paul Henry was a fugitive at the time. There was an arrest warrant against him for embezzlement. He couldn't conduct legal transactions. And where is this Albert now? He lives in New York. He recently learned the land was being used and came to claim his rights. Diana took a folder with documents from her bag. Here are the certificates proving Albert is the son of Paul Henry and the sole legal heir. Dorothy examined the papers. They looked authentic with official stamps and signatures. What do you want? We want our land back, but my client is a reasonable person. He is willing to pay you what you invested, plus compensation for your work. How much? $30,000. It was a tempting amount, much more than Dorothy had or could have in a short time, but it meant losing everything she had built. I need to talk to my partner. Of course, but it's best to decide quickly. If we have to go to court, you could lose everything and still have to pay the legal costs. After Diana left, Dorothy ran to the factory. She told everything to Mr. Howard, who became thoughtful. This story doesn't convince me. Why? First, the broker appears with false environmental threats. Now a lawyer appears with an inheritance story. It's too much of a coincidence. But the documents seemed real. Documents can be forged. Let's verify. How? I'll ask Barbara to research. She understands legal documentation. Barbara spent the rest of the day verifying the documents presented by Diana. She made calls to notary offices, checked court websites, and consulted public records. By late afternoon, she had important information. Dorothy, I found several irregularities in these documents. How so? First, Paul Henry was not a fugitive in 1976. There is no record of an arrest warrant against him. So the lawyer lied? Second, Albert Henderson does exist, but he is not the son of Paul Henry. He is the son of another man with the same name who lived in Charleston. And third? Third, Diana Richardson is not a lawyer registered with the Bar Association. It's a sham. Dorothy felt anger and relief at the same time. Anger at being deceived again, relief at knowing she wouldn't lose her property. What do we do now? Now we're going to put an end to this clown show, said Mr. Howard, determined. How? I'll call the real Vernon. If Paul Henry really disappeared 50 years ago, Vernon might know how to find information about what happened to him. And if he's dead? Very likely after so much time. But he might have relatives who know the story. Mr. Howard spent the rest of the week investigating. He discovered that Paul Henry had moved to Miami in 1976, where he lived until his death in 1995. He left a widow, Mrs. Hilda, who still lived in South Beach. I'll go to Miami to talk to her. Alone? Barbara can go with me. She understands documents. And if it's dangerous? It won't be. They're just some charlatans trying to pull a scam. Mr. Howard and Barbara traveled to Miami on Saturday. They found Mrs. Hilda, an 82-year-old lady, lucid and with excellent memory. Paul, of course I remember him. He was my husband. Do you know why he left Columbus? Yes, I do. He had a brick factory that bothered some powerful people at the time. Bothered how? Paul discovered he could make bricks much cheaper and with better quality than the big companies in the region. That hurt their business. And what did they do? They tried to buy his factory. When he refused, they started creating difficulties. They cancelled contracts, spread rumors, created problems with suppliers. And did he give up? He didn't give up, but he understood he couldn't compete against such powerful people. So he hid the factory and came here, where he set up a small construction materials business. Did he ever transfer the land to Vernon? Yes, he did. Vernon was his cousin and a trusted person. Paul wanted to protect the property until he could return and reopen the factory. And why did he never return? Because he found he could live well here, and he was afraid the problems would start again if he went back to Columbus. Mrs. Hilda, did your husband leave any documents about the factory? Yes, he did. There's a box with all his papers. I never touched it because I didn't understand any of it. Barbara examined the documents. There were factory blueprints, formulas for producing special bricks, and, most importantly, a testamentary letter recognizing Vernon as the legitimate heir to the land. This clears up all doubts, said Barbara. How so? Paul made it clear in writing that the land legitimately belonged to Vernon, and Vernon legitimately sold it to Dorothy. You mean those people were really trying to deceive us? Exactly. Back in Columbus, Mr. Howard and Barbara found Dorothy distressed. Over the weekend, she had received 2 more intimidating visits. A City Hall inspector showed up saying the underground construction is not up to code. And what did you say? That the construction predates the law requiring permits. And he said it still needs to be regularized, and that it could cost $20,000. Another lie, said Mr. Howard. Old constructions have vested rights. And there was more. A man came saying he represents the electric company, said the connection we made is irregular and could be cut off. That's also a lie. Barbara checked everything when we made the connection. Howard, I'm scared. These people won't give up. They really won't. But now we have the weapons to defend ourselves. How? With the truth. And with help. What help? I know a journalist who works at the local newspaper. We'll tell our story to him. A journalist? Yes. When this story comes out in the newspaper, these people will have to stop bothering us. The next day, Mr. Howard took Dorothy to meet Mark Santos, a journalist at the Columbus Daily. He was a young man about 30 years old, specializing in investigations into irregularities and corruption. Dorothy told the whole story, from the purchase of the land to the intimidation attempts. Brandon listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes. This is an interesting story. A humble woman who discovers a hidden treasure and has to face powerful people who want to steal it from her. Are you going to publish it? Yes, I am. But first, I need to verify some information and try to get in touch with these people who are bothering you. Won't it be dangerous? Not for me. I'm a journalist. I have legal protection. Brandon spent a week investigating. He discovered that Roger Silverman and his partners had a history of questionable practices in real estate business. They have already been investigated by the Criminal Investigation Unit for fraud, he told Dorothy. And the construction company they represent has several complaints for irregularities. So they really are criminals. They are. But white-collar criminals who use the law and intimidation instead of violence. The article came out in the newspaper on Wednesday with the headline, "Widow Discovers Old Factory and Faces Attempted Fraud." The piece told the whole story, including photos of the underground factory and interviews with Dorothy and Mr. Howard. The effect was immediate. That same day, 3 people showed up at the property wanting to see the factory and order bricks. One was an engineer and was impressed with the quality of the products. "Could you supply bricks for a condominium I'm designing?" "How many bricks?" "About 20,000. Dorothy did the math quickly. $40,000. It was more than she would earn in a year working as a housekeeper. "Yes, we can." But the best was yet to come. In the late afternoon, she received an unexpected call. It was from a television producer from New York. "Mrs. Dorothy, I'm Frank Cooper from National Broadcasting. I saw the article about your story and would like to do a piece for the program Here and Now." "A piece on television?" "That's right. Your story is inspiring. A simple person who doesn't let herself be intimidated and builds a business with her own hands." "But I don't know how to speak on television." "You speak very well. Just tell the same story you told the newspaper." The report was scheduled for the following week. Frank Cooper came from New York with a small team and spent the whole day filming the factory, interviewing Dorothy and Mr. Howard, and documenting the brick-making process. "Mrs. Dorothy, what was the most difficult moment in this whole story?" "I think it was when I found out that people were trying to trick me to steal my land. I felt a lot of anger, but also a lot of fear." "And what was the happiest moment?" "When I saw the first brick coming out of the machine. That's when I realized my gamble had paid off." "What would you say to people who are going through financial difficulties?" I would say that sometimes the solution is where we least expect it. I bought a piece of land that everyone thought was worthless, and that's exactly what changed my life. The report aired the following week and had a big impact. Dorothy's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Architects, engineers, and builders from all over the state wanted to know about the handmade bricks from the Crater factory. Within a month, they had orders for 6 months of production. They needed to hire more people and expand operations. Dorothy, who had started alone with a borrowed hoe, was now coordinating a team of 12 people. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out, now continuing. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Success brought new challenges. The demand was so great that they needed to invest in new equipment to increase production, and that meant costs they couldn't yet cover. Dorothy, we're going to need at least $50,000 to buy new machines, said Mr. Howard. 50,000? Where are we going to get that from? We could try for a loan at the bank. With what collateral? I have nothing to offer besides the land itself. Maybe that will be enough. They went to the bank the following Monday. The manager, Mr. Robert, received them with a certain condescension. $50,000 is a considerable amount. What assurance do we have that you'll be able to repay it? We have signed contracts to deliver 100,000 bricks in the next 6 months, replied Barbara, who now handled the administrative side. Contracts can be cancelled. I need real collateral. What about the land? Let me check. The manager consulted his computers and phones for several minutes. When he returned, his expression had completely changed. I'm sorry, but we cannot approve this loan. Why? The land has some pending issues that prevent it from being used as collateral. What issues? Environmental matters. There's an ongoing investigation into soil contamination. Dorothy felt her blood run cold. They were the same lies Roger had used months before, but now it seemed they had somehow managed to make them official. That can't be true. We already checked with the environmental agency, and there's nothing. It might be a recent investigation. In any case, while it's pending, I cannot accept the land as collateral. They left the bank frustrated and worried. Someone had managed to create false bureaucratic problems to hinder their business. What do we do now? Asked Dorothy. We're going to find out who's behind this, said Barbara, determined. How? I'll go to the relevant agencies and find out exactly what kind of investigation this is and who requested it. Barbara spent 2 days chasing information. In the end, she discovered something outrageous. I managed to find out. The environmental investigation was requested by an NGO called American Soil Protection. Never heard of it. Me neither. So I dug for more information. And what did you find? That this NGO was created just 3 months ago. And guess who the founders are? Who? Roger Silverman and that Dr. Maurice. They created a fake NGO to harm our business? Exactly. And worse, they managed to get the investigation officially registered by a public official who must be taking bribes. And what can we do? Report it. This is a crime. But Mr. Howard pondered. If we report it now, it could take months or years to resolve. And in the meantime, we're stuck, unable to grow the business. So what do you suggest? That we find another way to get the money, and we leave the report for later, as a way to ensure they stop bothering us. What other way? We can look for private investors, individuals who want to put money into a prosperous business. The idea came from Brandon, Dorothy's son, who now worked full-time at the factory and had become an expert in operating the machines. Mum, why don't we form a partnership with our own customers? How so? Instead of selling finished bricks, we sell production shares. A customer invests a certain amount and receives bricks over an agreed period. I don't quite understand. It's like this. A customer who needs 10,000 bricks can invest $20,000 in our production. With that money, we buy equipment and produce 15,000 bricks for them. They get 5,000 extra bricks, and we get the capital to grow. Barbara liked the idea. It's like a cooperative. The customers become temporary partners. Exactly, and everyone wins. They presented the proposal to some of their main clients. The response was surprisingly positive. It's an interesting idea, said the engineer Sarah, who had ordered bricks several times before. How much investment would you need? $50,000 for equipment and expansion. And what would the return be? 30% more in bricks than the invested amount. In how much time? 6 months. I accept investing $15,000. Within 2 weeks, they managed to raise the necessary $50,000 through 5 different investors. Each became a temporary partner in the production, entitled to receive bricks for the invested amount plus a 30% bonus. With the money in hand, they bought modern equipment that tripled the production capacity. They also installed a solar energy system to reduce operational costs. The factory began operating with industrial efficiency, but maintained the artisanal quality that set it apart in the market. In 3 months, they were producing 15,000 bricks per month and already had a waiting list of new clients. It was around this time that they received an unexpected visit. It was an elegant man, about 50 years old, who introduced himself as Charles Edward Ferguson. I represent an investment firm from New York. We heard about your success and have a proposal. What kind of proposal? We want to buy 50% of your operation for $500,000. Dorothy almost choked. $500,000 was more money than she could earn in 20 years of domestic work. 50%? Yes. You would continue running the production, but we would come in as investor partners. With our capital, you could expand throughout the entire state of New York. And what would our share of the profits be? 50%, proportional to what each invested. Can I talk to my partners? Of course. But the offer has a deadline. 1 week. That night, Dorothy gathered the whole team at the factory to discuss the proposal. Opinions were divided. It's a unique opportunity, said Brandon. $500,000. We'll never have financial problems again. But we lose control of the business, pondered Mr. Howard. They might want to change everything. What if they are like those others who tried to steal from us? Asked Ashley. These seem to be serious people, said Barbara. I checked their company. It's reputable and well regarded. Tyler, who was now 13 and helped with the simplest tasks, gave his opinion. Mom, why don't we ask them to wait a little longer? For us to grow more on our own? It was a sensible suggestion. Dorothy decided to make a counter-offer. Mr. Charles Edward, we thank you for the offer, but we would like to make a counter-proposal. What is it? In 6 months, when we have consolidated our current operation, we can talk about a partnership, but for now, we prefer to remain independent. I understand, but the opportunity may not come again. It's a risk we are willing to take. Charles Edward left clearly displeased, but did not insist. Dorothy wondered if she had made the right decision. The answer came in the following weeks. The factory continued to grow sustainably. They managed to pay all the investors as promised, and still had profit left to reinvest in the business. More importantly, they managed to maintain total control over product quality and the treatment of employees. That was exactly what Dorothy wanted, a prosperous but humane business. At the end of the first year of operation, they had an impressive balance. The factory had produced 150,000 bricks, generated $300,000 in revenue, and employed 15 people from the region. A year ago, I was a desperate, unemployed woman, reflected Dorothy during the celebration dinner. Today, I manage a prosperous company. And it all started with $100 and a piece of land nobody wanted, added Brandon. The most important thing is that we haven't changed our essence, said Mr. Howard. We are still simple people who work honestly. It was a time of stability and steady growth. Dorothy Mitchell managed to buy a house for her family, her children returned to studying with financial peace of mind, and she discovered a talent for business she never imagined she had. But, as always happens in life, when everything seems to be going perfectly well, new challenges arise. The first sign of trouble appeared when some customers began complaining about delays in deliveries. The factory was operating at full capacity, and any unforeseen event caused problems in the schedule. We need to expand again, said Barbara, analyzing the numbers. We're already using all the available space on the lot, observed Mr. Howard. What about the lot next door? Suggested Brandon. It's been empty for years. That's an idea, said Dorothy. I'll talk to the owner. The neighboring lot belonged to an elderly lady, Mrs. Louise, who lived in a simple little house on the edge of the property. Dorothy knew her by sight, but they had never spoken. Mrs. Louise received her warmly. Oh, you're the lady from the factory. I've been following your success. How wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Louise. Actually, I came to make you a proposal. What proposal? I would like to know if you would sell your lot. I need to expand my production. Sell? I don't know about that. This land has belonged to my family for over 60 years. I understand completely, but I can make a generous offer. How much? $100,000. Mrs. Louise was silent for a few moments. That's a lot of money. Yes, it is, and you could buy a better house somewhere else. Let me think, dear. It's a difficult decision. Of course, there's no rush, but apparently there was rush for other people. 3 days later, Mrs. Louise called Dorothy, agitated. Dear, a person showed up here offering $150,000 for my lot. Dorothy's heart sank. She recognized that strategy. Who was it? A broker named Roger something. It was him again. Roger had not given up and was now trying to prevent Dorothy from expanding her business by buying the lot she needed. Mrs. Louise, I can increase my offer to $160,000. Oh dear, I don't know, the other man said. If I don't accept today, he'll withdraw the offer. That's unnecessary pressure. Take some time to think. But he said he has other lots in the area, and if he can't get mine, he'll buy another. It was the old trick of psychological pressure. Dorothy recognized Roger's tactics. Mrs. Louise, this man has tried to harm me several times. Don't trust him. But his money is as good as yours, right? The money might be, but the intentions aren't. Mrs. Louise was confused by the situation. She was a simple lady who didn't understand business disputes and just wanted to do what was best for her. What do you advise me? I think you should wait a bit. Talk to your family. Maybe ask for advice from someone you trust. You're right, I'll talk to my son who lives in New York. Dorothy left her neighbor's house worried. She knew Roger would not hesitate to use every possible trick to get what he wanted. Her concern was confirmed the next day. Mrs. Louise appeared at the factory, agitated and confused. Dorothy, I need your help. What is it, Mrs. Louise? That man came back with a court officer. He said my lot has overdue property tax debts and could be seized. Is that true? I don't know. I've always paid my property tax on time. I have all the receipts saved. Bring the receipts here. Barbara can check them for you. Mrs. Louise returned with a box full of papers organized chronologically. Barbara examined everything carefully. There are no overdue property taxes, said Barbara. Everything is paid correctly. Then why did that man say that? Because he's trying to scare you into selling the lot for less. What a wicked person. Yes. And unfortunately, it's not the first time he's done this. Barbara suggested that Mrs. Louise go to City Hall to officially confirm there was no debt. She also advised her to demand to see the identification of any process server who showed up. Malicious people sometimes hire actors to pose as public officials. Jesus, what kind of world is this? Dorothy accompanied Mrs. Louise to City Hall. There they confirmed there were no pending issues with the lady's property. Furthermore, the responsible official said it would be impossible for a process server to be involved in that type of matter without an official notification first. In other words, you were the victim of an attempted scam, explained the official. Mrs. Louise was so outraged by the attempt to deceive her that she decided to sell to Dorothy after all. I'd rather sell to an honest person I know than to some crook trying to trick me. Are you sure, Mrs. Louise? Yes, I am. You offered $160,000, right? I did. Then it's a deal. The purchase of the neighboring property allowed Dorothy to expand the factory significantly. They built a modern warehouse that tripled the production area and installed even more efficient equipment. The new operation allowed them to produce up to 30,000 bricks per month, serving customers from all over the state of New York. Dorothy needed to hire a sales manager, an accountant, and 8 more workers. What had started as a family business had turned into a small company. and Dorothy discovered she had a natural talent for management and customer relations. "Mom, you've become a businesswoman," joked Ashley, who was now studying business administration at a private college paid for by the factory's profits. "I never imagined I'd enjoy being in business," admitted Dorothy. "And you're doing very well. The employees respect you, and the customers trust your word." It was true. Dorothy had developed a reputation for seriousness and quality that attracted more and more customers. Architects and engineers recommended the bricks from the Crater factory to each other. The second year of operation was even better than the first. They earned $800,000 and managed to give a salary increase to all employees. Dorothy also created a profit-sharing program that benefited the whole team. "It's important that everyone feels part of the success," she explained to Barbara. "You've learned a lot about people management. I've learned that treating employees well is the best investment a company can make." It was during this time of prosperity that something totally unexpected happened. Dorothy received a call from a lawyer in Charleston. "Mrs. Dorothy, my name is Dr. Henry Morris. I represent the family of Paul Henry Mitchell." The name froze Dorothy's blood. Paul Henry was the former owner of the factory she had discovered. "What do you want?" "Well, the family has become aware that you are using equipment that belonged to Mr. Paul Henry." "How so?" "The brick factory machines. They were not part of the property transferred to Vernon Parker. They were the personal property of Mr. Paul Henry." "That can't be true." "Unfortunately, it is. I have documents here proving the machines were purchased by Paul Henry with his own funds and were never included in the sale of the land." "And what does the family want?" "They want the machines back, or compensation of $200,000. Dorothy felt her world collapse. Without the original machines, her factory would lose the ability to produce bricks with the special quality that set it apart in the market. "Can I see these documents?" "Of course, I can email them or deliver them in person." "I prefer you deliver them in person." "Perfect. I can come there tomorrow." After hanging up the phone, Dorothy ran to tell the situation to Mr. Howard and Barbara. "Another scam," said Mr. Howard immediately. "How can you be sure?" "Because if it were legitimate, they would have shown up 2 years ago when we started using the machines." "Why only now?" "Maybe they only just found out," suggested Barbara. "Or maybe someone hired them to hurt us," countered Mr. Howard. "Let's wait to see the documents before jumping to conclusions." The next day, Dr. Henry arrived punctually. He was a serious-looking man, around 60, with an executive briefcase and a professional demeanor. "Everyone, here are the documents I mentioned." He opened the briefcase and took out several pages. Barbara examined everything carefully while Dorothy and Mr. Howard waited anxiously. "The documents seem authentic," Barbara finally said. "Seem?" "The signatures match others we have from Paul Henry. The stamps also look genuine." "So the machines really don't belong to us?" "According to these documents, no." Dr. Henry intervened. "I understand this is a blow for you, but my clients are reasonable people. They are willing to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "You can keep the machines in exchange for compensation of $100,000. It's half the market value." "And if we can't pay?" "Then, unfortunately, we will have to go to court to reclaim the equipment." "How long do we have to decide?" 1 week. After the lawyer left, the factory team gathered to discuss the situation. The mood was one of discouragement and worry. $100,000 is a lot of money, said Brandon. "Where will we get it?" "We could take out a bank loan," suggested Barbara. "With what collateral?" countered Mr. Howard. "And even if we manage, we'll be in debt for years." "Maybe we should accept that investor's offer from New York," said Ashley. "With $500,000, we could pay off this debt and still have money left over." "But we lose control of the business," Dorothy reminded them. It was a difficult dilemma. Accepting the investor meant losing their independence but solving all their financial problems. Rejecting it meant taking on heavy debt and risking losing the machines anyway. "I'll call Mrs. Hilda," said Mr. Howard. "Paul Henry's widow? Why?" "To confirm if she really authorized this claim." Mr. Howard called Miami and spoke at length with Mrs. Hilda. When he hung up, his face was serious. "Well?" Mrs. Hilda had no idea what I was talking about. She never authorized anyone to charge us anything. What do you mean? She said she has no relatives interested in Paul's things, and that she never hired any lawyer to settle inheritance matters. You mean it's another scam? It means someone is pretending to be her representative. Barbara picked up the documents the lawyer had left and began examining them more carefully. Wait a minute. There's something strange here. What? The dates. These documents are dated 1975, but one of the signatures is made with a pen that wasn't invented until the 80s. How do you know that? I've worked with documentation for years. You learn to spot these details. Mr. Howard examined other aspects of the papers. And here, look at this watermark. It's from paper that only started being manufactured in the 90s. So the documents are fake, completely forged, and poorly forged at that. The discovery that the documents were false brought relief, but also worry. It meant someone was investing considerable time and money to hurt them. Who could be behind all this? Asked Dorothy. I suspect it's the same group as before, said Mr. Howard. Roger and his partners. But why don't they give up? Because our business is doing very well. They must be losing money because of us. How so? If they represent a large construction company, our handmade bricks might be competing with their products. Or maybe, suggested Barbara, they still want our land because of that mall that's going to be built. Could be. Or it could be both. What do we do about the fake lawyer? We'll confront him. If he's trying to extort us with fake documents, he's committing a crime. Won't that be dangerous? I'll call Brandon the journalist. If he's present, they won't try anything. Mark Santos agreed to accompany the confrontation. They arranged a meeting with Dr. Henry in downtown Columbus at a busy cafe where there would be plenty of witnesses. Dr. Henry, we took a closer look at the documents you brought, said Barbara. And what's the conclusion? They're fake. Excuse me? The dates don't match the materials used, and we spoke with Mrs. Hilda. She never authorized you to contact us. The man's face completely changed. His professional demeanor vanished, replaced by obvious nervousness. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, we know, said Mark, showing his press badge, and I'm sure my readers will be interested in this story. Listen here, folks. I think there's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, retorted Mr. Howard. You tried to extort us with fake documents. Well, perhaps the documents I was given weren't correct. Who gave them to you? Some clients. They said they were relatives of Paul Henry. What clients? I can't reveal that. Professional confidentiality. Confidentiality of what? Said Mark. If the documents are fake, there's no legitimate attorney-client relationship. Look, I'll talk to my clients and clear up this confusion, then I'll get back to you. Don't, said Dorothy firmly. If you show up on our property again, we'll call the police. The fake lawyer left the cafe quickly, clearly frightened by the possibility of his illegal activities being exposed publicly. I don't think we'll have any more trouble from him, said Mark. I hope not, replied Dorothy. But I have a feeling these people won't give up easily. Dorothy's prediction was correct. 2 weeks later, they received an official notification from City Hall informing them that there were irregularities in the construction of the new factory area. What irregularities? Asked Barbara of the inspector who brought the notification. The construction doesn't have the proper permit. It needs to be regularized or it will be shut down. But we followed all the regulations. We have all the documents. The documents you have are for a renovation. This construction is considered new work and requires a different permit. No one informed us of this before. It's the owner's responsibility to find out about the necessary permits. And how much does it cost to regularize? Regularization fee, $15,000, plus a fine for irregular construction, $10,000. Total, $25,000. Barbara requested the regulatory period for defense and immediately appealed the decision, but the process could take months to resolve, and during that time, the new factory area could not operate. It's another way to pressure us, said Mr. Howard. But this time they used official bureaucracy, observed Barbara, meaning they might have someone inside City Hall working for them. Or that they managed to convince some official that we really are in violation. The situation became even more complicated when they discovered the notification had been prompted by an anonymous complaint. Someone had filed a formal complaint alleging the factory was operating without the proper permits. Who would file a complaint like that? Asked Ashley. Someone who wants to harm us, answered Dorothy. But getting City Hall to take such quick action, that requires influence. Or a bribe, said Mr. Howard cynically. The embargo on the new area cut production capacity in half. Dorothy had to renegotiate deadlines with several clients and even cancel some orders. The employees began to worry about the stability of their jobs. Mrs. Dorothy, are we going to keep working? Asked Charles, one of the oldest workers. Yes, we are, Charles. It's just a temporary problem. But if they manage to shut down part of the factory, they might be able to shut down the rest too. They won't succeed, the old part is all legal. I hope so. I need this job to support my family. The conversation with Charles made Dorothy realize that her responsibility had grown far beyond what she had imagined. It wasn't just her and her family who depended on the factory's success. It was 15 families of employees, plus the suppliers and clients who trusted the business. It was a lot of pressure, but also extra motivation not to give up. Barbara managed to speed up the defense process at City Hall by hiring a lawyer specialized in administrative law. They discovered that the anonymous complaint had been made with very precise and detailed information. Whoever filed the complaint knows our operation very well, said the lawyer. They cited details that only someone who has been here could know. Like what, for example? The exact measurements of the new construction, the location of the equipment, even the type of roofing tile used. Could it have been one of our employees? Or a client who visited the factory? Or even a supplier? It was a disturbing possibility. It meant that someone they trusted could be passing information to their adversaries. Dorothy decided to have a frank talk with the entire team. Everyone, I need to talk to you about something important. She gathered all the employees in the factory yard during the lunch break. You know we're going through some difficulties with bureaucratic issues. Yes, we know, said Barbara on behalf of the group. What you might not know is that I suspect someone is passing information about our operation to people who want to harm us. A murmur of surprise and indignation ran through the group. What do you mean, Mrs. Dorothy? Asked Vernon. Someone filed a complaint at City Hall with details that only someone who knows the factory well could know. Do you think it's someone from inside here? I don't want to accuse anyone, but I ask everyone to be careful about who they talk to about our work. Mrs. Dorothy, said Charles, visibly offended, everyone here depends on the factory to live. No one would want to harm the company. I know, Charles, and I trust you, but sometimes people can pass on information without realizing they're doing harm. How so? By talking with friends, family, neighbors, without thinking that this information could reach the wrong ears. The conversation served to alert the team about the need for discretion, but it also created an atmosphere of distrust that Dorothy didn't want. It was another problem caused by the persecution they were suffering. The following week, something happened that completely changed the course of events. Dorothy received a call from Mrs. Louise, the neighbor from whom she had bought the additional land. Dorothy, I need to tell you something important. What is it, Mrs. Louise? Remember that man who tried to trick me with the story about the overdue property tax? Yes, I remember. Yesterday he showed up again, but this time he wasn't trying to buy my land. What did he want? He was asking about your factory. He wanted to know how many employees you have, what kind of machines you use, what your operating hours are. Did you answer? Of course not. I said I didn't know anything and that he could leave. And did he insist? He insisted. Offered $500 just for me to tell what I knew about you. $500? Yes, that's when I was sure it was some kind of setup. I said I'd call the police if he didn't leave. And did he? He did. But before that, he said something strange. What? He said you wouldn't be able to keep going for much longer, that arrangements had already been made to close the factory. Mrs. Louise's information confirmed that Roger and his partners were behind the bureaucratic difficulties the factory was facing, and the phrase about arrangements having been made suggested there were more problems to come. Dorothy decided it was time to go on the offensive. Instead of just defending, she needed to find out exactly who was behind the harassment and why. Barbara, can you hire a private detective? I can, but it will be expensive. How much? About $5,000 for a full investigation. It's worth it. I need to know what we're fighting against. The detective hired by Barbara was a former police officer named Robert Woods. He was about 50 years old and specialized in corporate investigations. I want to know everything about Roger Silverman and his partners, said Dorothy. Who they work with, where their money comes from, why they're interested in my land. It will take about 2 weeks to have a full report. Perfect. While waiting for the investigation results, Dorothy tried to keep the factory running normally despite the limitations. Production was reduced, but they could still serve their most important clients. That's when she received an unexpected offer. Charles Edward, the investor from New York who had approached her months before, called again. Mrs. Dorothy, I heard you're going through some difficulties. Temporary difficulties. Even so, I'd like to renew my investment proposal. On the same terms. Actually, I've improved the terms. $800,000 for 60% of the operation. That's a lot of money. Yes, it is. And with that capital, you could solve all the bureaucratic problems and expand nationwide. Can I think about it? Of course. But don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often. It was tempting. With $800,000, they could pay all the regularization costs, invest in new equipment, and still have money left for emergencies. But Dorothy had learned to be wary of offers that appeared in times of trouble. Mr. Howard, don't you think it's strange this man showing up right now? I do. It could be a coincidence, but it could also be that he has some connection to our problems. How so? Think about it. He shows up offering money when we're being pressured. If we accept, he becomes the majority partner and can make all the decisions. And if we later find out he was behind the pressure, it would already be too late. Exactly. Dorothy decided to wait for the detective's report before making any decision about the investor. The wait was worth it. Robert Woods brought surprising information. I discovered a lot of interesting things about your friend Roger. Tell me. First, he is not a registered real estate agent. He's just a front man who works for other people. What people? Second, the construction company he claimed to represent doesn't exist. It's a shell company. And third, he works for a group of investors from New York who buy cheap land in areas that are about to appreciate. And who are these investors? That's where it gets interesting. One of the main partners is Charles Edward Ferguson. Dorothy felt her blood run cold. Charles Edward, the man who was offering to invest in her factory, was Roger's partner. Are you sure? Absolutely. They've been working together for over 5 years. The scheme is always the same. They create difficulties for the owners until they agree to sell cheap or accept an investor who actually wants to take over the business. And if the person doesn't accept, then they increase the pressure. Problems in court, environmental issues, bureaucratic difficulties, until the person gives up or goes bankrupt. How many people have they done this to? At least about 15 in the last 5 years, always in small towns where they plan to build shopping centers or large developments. And do they get away with it? They do because they're clever. They never do anything clearly illegal. They use the system's own bureaucracy against the victims. But this time it won't work. Why? Because now I know who they are and what they want. Dorothy gathered her team to share the investigation's findings. The mood was one of outrage, but also determination. You mean that Charles Edward is a criminal? Asked Brandon. Yes, and a smart criminal who uses legal methods to steal. And what do we do now? Now we're going to turn the tables on them. How? With the same weapons they use, information and strategy. Dorothy had learned a lot about business in the last 2 years, and one of the most important lessons was that knowledge is power. Barbara, can you investigate if they did the same thing to other people here in Columbus? I can. And if we find other victims, then we bring everyone together and file a lawsuit together. It will be stronger than each person fighting alone. The strategy worked better than they expected. Barbara discovered that at least 6 people in the region had been pressured by Charles Edward's group in the last 2 years. A merchant had sold his land for 1/3 of its market value after receiving threats of tax lawsuits. A small farmer had lost his property after environmental problems appeared out of nowhere, and an elderly lady had been tricked with the same story about property tax debts they tried to use with Mrs. Louise. "It's all the same scam," said Barbara after speaking with all the victims. "And are they willing to join a class action lawsuit?" "They are. They're as outraged as we are." Dorothy hired a law firm specialized in class actions. The attorney in charge, Dr. Frank Armstrong, was impressed with the amount of evidence they had gathered. "It's one of the most well-documented cases I've ever seen. You've done an excellent investigation." "And do we have a chance of winning?" "We do. And more. We can seek compensation for moral and material damages." "How long does this type of lawsuit usually take?" "Normally it takes years, but with this volume of evidence, I can get an injunction to stop the harassment while the lawsuit proceeds." The injunction was granted in 2 weeks. The judge ordered that Charles Edward and his partners immediately stop any kind of pressure on the owners mentioned in the lawsuit. The effect was immediate. The bureaucratic difficulties at Dorothy's factory began to resolve quickly. The new area was cleared for operation and production returned to normal. "Finally, we can work in peace," celebrated Mr. Howard. "I hope so," replied Dorothy. "But I'll keep an eye out. People like that don't give up easily." Her caution was right. Charles Edward and his partners tried some maneuvers to circumvent the injunction, but without success. The lawsuit was well underway, and they knew they risked criminal conviction if they continued the harassment. In the end, they preferred to settle. They paid compensation to all the victims and committed to no longer operating in the Columbus region. "How much will you receive?" asked Ashley. $50,000 in compensation, plus the commitment that they will never bother me again. "And what are you going to do with that money?" "Invest in the factory, buy new equipment and improve the workers' conditions." The factory's 3rd year of operation was the most prosperous yet. Without external pressures, Dorothy could focus entirely on growing the business. They implemented new production techniques, diversified the types of bricks offered, and expanded their area of operation to other states. The factory became a benchmark for artisanal bricks throughout the Southeast region. "Mom, when I was a kid, I never imagined I'd work in a factory," said Tyler, who was now 15 and helped with administrative tasks. "Neither did I, son. Life takes many turns." "Do you regret buying that land?" "Not at all. It was the best decision I've ever made." "Even with all the problems we faced?" "The problems made us grow. If it had been easy, maybe we wouldn't have learned so much." It was true. The difficulties had taught Dorothy important lessons about perseverance, strategy, and leadership. She had transformed from an unemployed domestic worker into a respected businesswoman. But the most important thing was that she had managed to do it without losing her essence. She remained a simple person who treated her employees well and kept her word with clients. "Mrs. Dorothy," said Charles, the worker who had been with her from the start, "you changed a lot of people's lives." "How so?" "All of us who work here were struggling before. You gave a chance to people no one else wanted to hire. You're the ones who make the factory run. Yes, but you're the one who believed in us when no one else did." That was the recognition that touched Dorothy the most. Knowing she had helped other families have a better life gave meaning to all her effort. In the 4th year, the factory reached an important milestone. It produced its 1,000,000th brick. It was a special celebration, with a party for all the employees and their families. 1,000,000 bricks, reflected Mr. Howard during the party. "How many houses do you think we've helped build?" "Hundreds," answered Brandon. "Maybe thousands. And each house a family with its own stories." Dorothy looked around and saw her employees celebrating with their children. She saw Mrs. Louise, who had become a sort of adoptive grandmother to the factory staff. She saw her own children, now responsible, hard-working young adults. "It all started with a crater that nobody wanted," she said, "and turned into a company that everyone respects," added Barbara. It was a happy ending, but Dorothy knew it wasn't really an ending. It was the beginning of a new phase. The factory was established, but there was still room to grow. And there were always new challenges and opportunities appearing. The important thing was that now she had experience, knowledge, and a team she trusted to face anything that came her way. That night, after the party, Dorothy stayed alone on the land where it all began. The crater was still there, but now it was part of a prosperous industrial complex that employed 30 people and produced the best artisanal bricks in the region. She looked at the stars and thought of Harold, her late husband. Would he be proud of what she had accomplished? Could he believe that the shy woman he had known had the courage to bet $100 on an abandoned plot of land and turn it into a successful business? "I think so, Harold," she murmured. "I think you'd be proud." A gentle breeze rustled the trees around her as if in answer. Dorothy smiled and walked back home. Tomorrow would be another workday, another day to continue building the future that had begun with a crater and $100. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you enjoyed Dorothy's transformation and believe she made the right decisions, please share your sincere thoughts in the comments. We really want to read your opinion and know if stories like this inspire you. Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.